You've heard it a million times, right? Practice makes perfect. But what if that's not the whole story? What if how you practice is actually way more important than how much you practice? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into, the science of actually getting better. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're just stuck? You're learning an instrument or maybe a new language or trying to level up in a sport. You're putting in the hours, you're doing the drills, but your progress just flatlines. You've hit that dreaded wall, that learning plateau, and it feels like no matter how much harder you try, you just can't break through.
Yeah, it's super frustrating, and almost everyone goes through it. But here's the good news. Hitting that wall usually doesn't mean you need to practice more. It means you need to practice differently. The secret isn't about brute force. It's about getting strategic.
All right, so let's start there. What do you do when just putting in the hours isn't cutting it anymore? The key to smashing through that plateau, it actually starts before you even do a single repetition. It starts with a little bit of analysis. You got to ask yourself one really important question. What kind of skill am I actually trying to learn here?
And that brings us right to our first step. Before you can figure out how to practice, you've got to understand what you're practicing. So let's analyze the skill.
Okay, so you can pretty much break skills down into two big categories. On one side, you've got open skills. These are things you do in a constantly changing, unpredictable environment. A rugby tackle is a perfect example. You have no idea what the other player is going to do. Then you have the opposite, closed skills, like a tennis serve. The environment is totally stable and predictable. You're in control, the net doesn't move, the lines are always in the same place.
And it's not just about open versus closed. Skills also have different levels of complexity. You've got basic skills, which don't take much brain power once you've got them down. But then there are complex skills, like a gymnast's entire floor routine. That's a whole chain of really difficult moves that needs your full undivided attention. And knowing this distinction, that's going to be a game changer for how you practice.
All right, so once you've figured out what kind of skill you're working with, it's time to open up the old practice toolkit. Let's get into it. Here are your 4 fundamental practice tools. Tool number 1 is something called massed practice. Think of this like cramming for a test. You're just doing the skill over and over and over, with no breaks until it starts to click. It's intense for sure, but it can be really good for getting the basic feel of something new and getting it fast. Then we have its total opposite, distributed practice. Instead of cramming, you spread your practice out over time, and you actually schedule in rest breaks. This is awesome because it stops you from getting tired and sloppy, and it gives your brain time to actually process and lock in what you've learned. It just leads to much higher quality, more effective practice. Okay, tool number 3 is fixed practice. The name kind of says it all. This is all about repetition. You do the exact same thing in the exact same situation again and again. The whole point here is to perfect one specific movement and just burn it right into your muscle memory. And our last tool, number 4, is variable practice. This is where you mix things up. You practice the skill, but in a bunch of different scenarios. So instead of just shooting free throws over and over, you're shooting from all over the court, from different angles, with defenders. This is all about building adaptability, so you're ready for anything in a real game.
So let's put that all together in a quick little summary. You've got massed practice for a quick start on the basics, distributed practice for better, long-term learning without burnout. Fixed practice is your go-to for perfecting those predictable, closed skills, and variable practice is what you need to master those unpredictable, open skills. Think of this as your personal cheat sheet for practicing smarter. Okay, so we've analyzed the skill and we've got our 4 tools. Now for the fun part. Let's talk about matching the right practice to the right purpose. Let's take a real-world example. Picture an elite Olympic-level archer. Now, archery, that's a classic closed skill, right? The target never moves. But it's also incredibly complex. It takes unbelievable precision and focus. So, how does someone like that practice?
Well, she's not just going to pick one tool. She'd use a combination. She's definitely using fixed practice, shooting that exact same shot thousands of times to perfect her technique. But, and this is the key, she's doing it with distributed practice. She takes planned breaks to make sure every single arrow she fires is her absolute best. It prevents fatigue and keeps her focus sharp, which is everything when you're at that level. And this really shows you the difference between a beginner and an expert. A total beginner learning a golf swing might use massed practice, just hitting a bucket of balls to get the basic motion down. But a pro golfer, they're using distributed practice to work on tiny microscopic adjustments, making sure every single swing is perfect. not just good enough.
Which brings us to our final section, putting this all together into the art of smart practice. Let's wrap this all up.
Look, if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. The best practice isn't just mindless repetition. It's strategic. It's about thinking like a coach for yourself, analyzing the situation, and picking the right tool for the job. So here's your 3-step game plan for smarter practice for literally anything. Step 1, analyze the skill. Is it open or closed, simple or complex? Step 2, choose your practice tool. Which one of those 4 fits the skill? And step 3, apply it to your level. Are you a beginner building a foundation, or are you an expert chasing perfection?
So I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. What's that one skill you're working on right now? You know, the one where you feel kind of stuck? Now that you have this toolkit, how are you going to practice it differently? What's your new strategy going to be? Because now you know the real secret isn't just to practice hard, it's to practice smart.